Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. I'm reading The Wheel of Time for the first time and sharing the experience with you. This is One Good Turn, The Eye of the World, and today I am covering Chapter 45. It's the Moria chapter, guys. Look, it occurs to me I hadn't brought up Moria in the last couple of chapters, but beyond the very clear reference to it at the end of the chapter, I was thinking about events in Moria as I'm going through this chapter. When Matt shoots the arrow, I thought, fool of a Matt, fool of a Cawthon. When we learned about the Trollocs, I was imagining hordes of them, and when the wind was winding, I imagined the hordes chasing after the Fellowship. So I suppose what I'm doing here by listing this is patting myself on the back for getting the comparison before the reference. There's a bit of light in the darkness, a very, very sweet moment of humanity that I really, really enjoyed. We'll get through that as well. Let's get into it. Immediately, you get a description of the broken bridge and just how deep the fall goes. A loose stone falls away, and there's no sound of striking bottom. Rand edges closer to the gap, and it's just blackness, and he doesn't really see anything of substance holding the bridges up. As it says, he feels as if the bridge is as thin as paper. I imagine him having a sense of vertigo. I would be so uncomfortable. He backs away. There is a brief thought in my mind of, are they going to try to jump over the gap? Is it, can they see the other edge of the bridge and can they make the jump? Did not think that would be a wise attempt. And I'm glad they didn't try. Nynaeve sees the gap and is like, well, is this all for nothing? Do we have to go back to Caemlyn? But it came with it, Nynaeve's characteristic bite at Moraine. And Moraine's like, no, there are so many other gates. No matter what happens, we're not going back to Caemlyn. And then Moraine asks Loial to find another path. And Loyal's distracted. He's staring at the gap. He's moved. Perturbed is the better word, by how much decay he's experiencing. He says, I had not dreamed the decay had gone so far. If the bridges themselves are breaking, it may be that I cannot find the path you want. It may be that I cannot find a path back either. The bridges could be falling behind us even now. Perrin insists there has to be a way. And Rand, looking at his glowing golden eyes, thinks, a wolf at bay. That's what he looks like. So that brings back up the topic of, is Perrin becoming more and more wolf-like? Or is it just that Rand is noticing these things for the first time? How much has Perrin truly meaningfully changed? He still seemed so much like himself in the last couple of Perrin POVs. Granted, he was under a lot of stress, and I know he was struggling between exploring the wolfish side of himself and cutting himself off from it. But he was still very much Perrin, and obviously we're getting this through Rand's experience of him now, and yes, he has changed in some ways. I'm just hoping that Perrin's not becoming so primal that eventually there'll be no trace of him left. Moraine offers a cautiously optimistic perception that the break here was old, it isn't necessarily the decay. Loial says he could find other paths more easily, perhaps to Tar Valon, or to his own steading. We'll see how the Tar Valon gateway looks, but I suppose it is a rule of storytelling that the goal must always be the farthest to get to and the most difficult to get to, huh? It couldn't just be that the place was one bridge over. I'm not complaining about the book, to be clear. I'm just lamenting, why are things always so difficult? Moraine insists Fal Dara, though. So they're looking for another path following Loial. Loyal's clearly very uncomfortable. He's talking to himself. At one point, he's speaking in his own language, and Rand thinks it's strange something so big can have a language that sounds like birds singing, which is neat. He should learn how to speak Ogier. That would be fun. Add it to his bardic routine. They're close to his homesteading, and he laments being so close but not being able to go. And Rand goes up and does the good thing and says, "When this is over, Loyal, you show me your steading, and I'll show you Emmons Field. No ways, though. We'll walk or ride if it takes all summer." "You believe it will ever be over, Rand?" And Rand frowns. "You said it would take 2 days to reach Faldara." Did he say 2? I could have sworn he said you could go pretty much anywhere in a day. I remember the past discussion very differently about what the ways were. But Loyal isn't talking about the ways, he's talking about everything. And this is surprisingly pessimistic coming from Loyal. I can only imagine it's the oppression of the darkness getting to him. He seems to have been more afraid of this place than any of the others. He says, "What makes you believe it will ever be over?" And there's no response that we're aware of. Eventually, Moraine announces that it is time for them to sleep for the night. I'm kind of surprised that they're willing to sleep at all. I would have imagined they'd be like, "Okay, we're gonna pull an all-nighter, guys. 48 hours. Let's go. Let's get this over and done with." But I can also understand how that might make you more prone to making mistakes. So as long as it's safe to sleep, it's safe to sleep. Nynaeve and Egwene set up an oil stove for tea, which does bring up the question of, are they taking bathroom breaks? But that's not a serious question. Loyal explains that things used to grow on the islands. Everything was green and soft, and there were all kinds of fruit from all year round. Perrin growls, "Nothing to hunt," and then is surprised that he said that. Perrin's becoming more wolfish. Moraine doesn't have to set any wards. She says pretty much anything she does with the power would be tainted here, so she doesn't intend to use it unless she has to. Everyone's kind of silent. They're all eating, or at least Lan is eating methodically, and Moraine ate well. And those lines, in conjunction with the line in the last chapter about how Rand didn't necessarily feel hungry, but he was glad to eat when he did start eating, had me wonder about the notion of eating as a good, as a sign of light, as a sign of living against this corruption and darkness, a good thing. But I don't actually think there was anything meaningfully there. And certainly it ended up being contradicted with the Emmons Fielders aren't particularly enjoying their food at this moment here. And then we get one of the best bits of news, unless my prediction ends up being true, in which case we get terrible news. My prediction being that Tom Merrilin is somehow corrupted. May it not be so. Moraine says, "I can tell you one cheerful thing. I do not think Tom Merrilin is dead." Rand looks up. "But the Fade!" "Matt told me what happened in Whitebridge. People there mentioned a Gleeman, but they said nothing of him dying. They would have, I think, if a Gleeman had been killed. Whitebridge is not so big as for a Gleeman to be a small thing, and Tom is a part of the pattern that weaves itself around you three. Too important a part, I believe, to be cut off yet." So that does open up the possibility that the beggar was Tom, in hiding because it was Caemlyn and he dare not be seen. Very interesting idea, because where else would he be? He told them to go to Caemlyn, and he kind of indicated, if I recall correctly, that he would try and meet them there. And what better way to do that? But then why wouldn't he just go to the Queen's Blessing? Why ask around? Maybe the Fade messed with his mind in some way. I don't think there's anything to indicate that, though. I hope Tom is okay. Rand gathers that Min must have said something to her, and he says, "Min, she saw something about Tom? She saw a great deal. About all of you. I wish I could understand half of what she saw, but even she does not. Old barriers fail, but whether what Min does is old or new, she sees true. Your fates are bound together. Tom Merrilin's too." At that point, I was wondering if Rand would offer up whatever Min had said about Nynaeve to the group, but that does not happen. And if I recall correctly, it wasn't anything particularly kind. So perhaps it's for the best. Although I do have to wonder if what was said from Min was more about the dangers that I assume Padden Fane was responsible for. Then Matt takes a jab at Rand. I don't see how she saw anything about any of us. As I remember it, she spent most of her time looking at Rand. Egwene raised an eyebrow. Oh, you didn't tell me that, Moraine Sedai. I'll say it in a moment. Rand glanced at her. She was not looking at him, but her tone had been too carefully neutral. Egwene! I do not like this Egwene. This is the least likable Egwene, this side of her. I've said it in past episodes. I don't need to get back into it. Rand says, I talked to her once. She dresses like a boy and her hair is as short as mine. You talked to her. Once. Egwene nodded slowly. Still not looking at him, she raised her cup to her lips. And then, best boy Perrin. Best wingman Perrin. Good Perrin. I don't even know if Perrin realizes what he's doing, because I'm pretty sure Perrin has a crush on Egwene. So it might have been, not at all about Rand. Says, Min was just somebody who worked at the inn in Bear Lawn. Not like Aram. Egwene choked on her tea. Too hot, she muttered. Best Perrin. Egwene deserves this. She really does. She has done this twice now to Rand, and it is cruel. It is cruel. It is not a good thing that she does. Who's Aram? Rand asked. Perrin smiled, much like Matt's smile in the old days when he was up to mischief and hid behind his cup. And the rest of this exchange, this scene, is really what I was referencing earlier about the light in the darkness. This is them being human. Humanity in the darkness. This is their being friends. These silly things that make being human human. These relationships, these young crushes, and it's great. One of the traveling people, Egwene said casually, but red spots bloomed in her cheeks. One of the traveling people, Perrin said blandly. He dances, like a bird. Wasn't that what you said, Egwene? It was like flying with a bird? Egwene set her cup down deliberately. I don't know if anyone else is tired, but I'm going to sleep. And then Perrin reaches out over to nudge Rand in the ribs and winked. And Rand is grinning back. That's the humanity in it. Rand thinks, burn me if I didn't come out best for a change. I wish I knew as much about women as Perrin. I think for every episode, for the past 4 or 5 episodes, I've said, I don't get tired of that joke. But then Matt comes in and says, maybe, Rand, you ought to tell Egwene about Farmer Grinwell's daughter, Elsie. Egwene lifted her head to stare first at Matt, then at him. And he hastily gets up and says, sleep sounds good to me right now. So fun. Very natural scene, I think. None of it felt forced or contrived. It was just sweet. It looks like Lan is probably going to be up all night. Matt whispers over to Rand. Rand, was there anything between you and Min? I barely got a look at her. She was pretty, but she must be nearly as old as Nynaeve. What about this Elsie? Perrin added from the other side of him. She pretty? Blood and ashes. Can't I even talk to a girl? You two are as bad as Egwene. As the wisdom says, watch your tongue. Well, if you won't talk about it, I'm going to get some sleep. Good. That's the first decent thing you've said. What can I say? It's fun. None of them are really able to sleep. At one point, Rand turns around and sees Matt looking at him. Not weird looking at him, just where else are you gonna look? You can't sleep. Rand is worried, of course, about the Dark One, but Moraine walks around and whispers something to everyone. I presume she's doing the thing that she did at the beginning, which is supposed to help them sleep. And she whispers to Rand, even here, your destiny protects you. Not even the Dark One can change the pattern completely. You are safe from him so long as I am close. Your dreams are safe. For a time yet, they are safe. Which is comforting, because I don't think it would be good to have a nightmare and wake up with your eyes pecked out. Here, don't do that. And somehow he does feel safe, and he goes to sleep, and he does not dream. Lan wakes them up. They have some tea, but only 1 cup. They eat in the saddle, and Lan notes that someone is following them. And immediately Matt shoots an arrow. No questions asked. And everything kind of happens very quickly here. And as soon as he shoots the arrow, I think, fool of a Matt. But Loyal starts muttering to himself. He's very scared, and everyone's kind of talking over each other. I knew I shouldn't have done this. Never deal with an Aes Sedai except in a steading, which was a surprising bit of prejudiced comment coming from Loyal. Like, I know the humans are prejudiced, but I suppose Loyal, as the representative of Ogier kind, thus far struck me as someone a bit more wizened, but here we are. No, he's in a scary situation. Of course he'll say stuff that his more rational side might be polite enough not to say. Lan says to Matt, "Stop that, you village idiot. There's no way to tell who it is." While Loyal is speaking, "That's the only place they're safe." "What else would be in a place like this besides something evil?" "That's what the elders say, and I should have listened to them." Lan says, "We are for one." And Egwene pipes in, "Maybe it's another traveler, an Ogier perhaps." Loyal says Ogier have more sense than to use the ways, except he doesn't have any sense. Moraine asks Lan what he feels, and Lan can't give a good answer because everything feels wrong. Whatever it is isn't trying to catch them. He almost caught up and scampered back across the bridge so as not to. And I saw the word scamper, and I remember how the beggar was described in that one scene with Rand, and I wondered if it was the beggar. In theory, it might still be, although I think by the end of this chapter we're kind of supposed to figure it's a Trolloc. Lan continues, "If I fall behind, I might surprise him, though, and see who or what he is." Loyal warns him not to. If he falls behind, he'll never get out. But Moraine decides as long as whatever it is, whoever it is, isn't bothering them, they won't bother it. Loyal suggests that he wouldn't mind getting out at Tar Valon, but he's cut off as the light of their lanterns reached the guiding. Near the top of the slab, deeply chiseled lines, sharp and angular, made wounds in the stone. Suddenly, Lan's alertness was no longer hidden. He remained easily erect in his saddle, but Rand had the sudden impression that the warder could feel everything around him, even feel the rest of them breathing. Lan circles them. Moraine says, "This explains much, and it makes me afraid. So much. I should have guessed. The taint, the decay. I should have guessed." And whatever makes Moraine afraid makes me afraid. I'm like, someone tell me something. And Nynaeve, good Nynaeve, smart Nynaeve, demands to know what it is, who did this. And Moraine says, "Trollocs or Fades. Whatever it was that was done to the guidepost, the guiding, they've written runes on them. The Trollocs have discovered how to enter the ways. That must be how they got to the two rivers undiscovered, through the Waygate at Manatherin." And I had a nearly called it moment here, because I'm pretty sure in a previous episode I had mentioned I had considered this possibility, but then I brushed it away, so I can't in good conscience claim to have called it. But I was like, I suspected it as an option. And at the end of the day, that they now know this, that they now have this bit of information, is actually a very, very, very good thing. Because now the Trollocs can't utilize it by surprise. So that's a reasonably big blow, I think, to the Dark One and his forces. She reckons that they can't know all of the pathways yet. Rand imagines walking through the gateway to find Trollocs waiting in the dark, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. And that is another big Moria moment that I observe. The idea, they make it to the foot of a bridge where they see the frozen shapes of Trollocs reared, caught flailing about them with hooked axes and scythe-like swords, gray and pitted like the stone. The huge bodies were half sunken in the swollen, bubbled surface. Some of the bubbles had burst, revealing more snouted faces, forever snarling with fear. It is a gruesome image, even for Trollocs. And this particular bridge is the first one on the path to Tar Valon. Moraine has a supposition about how and why this happened, but we'll get to that in a moment. Everyone here is pretty scared, and Rand touches Egwene's shoulder. It's a sweet moment. Nynaeve asks how Moraine can take all of this so calmly, knowing that the same thing could happen to them, and Moraine says, "Perhaps. It is more likely, though, that the men, the Aes Sedai who made the ways, protected them, building in traps for creatures of the Dark One." And I think, yeah, that makes sense. That's logical. I hope that's the case. I suspect it's the case. I doubt it matters if that's not the case at this point. Or anymore, rather. Not at this point, but by the end of the chapter. They continue on. They're going very carefully. The closer to their goal they get, particularly knowing this about Trollocs and traps, Moraine is going slower and is, I think, the first to risk herself in most cases. There is silence, except for the sound of their saddles creaking and the horses' hooves and coughing or muttering. And then we get the very concerning line, and I caught it right away. Later there was a distant wind too, off in the black somewhere. He could not say in which direction. At first he thought it was his imagination, but with time he became sure. And I remember my shin shin. So I think to myself, oh, that's not good. We're gonna get a dashing scene, which, surprise, surprise, is not unlike what happens in Moria. Rand thinks it'll be nice to feel the wind again. Then he realizes, wait, wind? Loyal, didn't you say there isn't any wind in the ways? Loyal pales and says, Mashin Shin. The black wind. The light illumine and protect us. It's the black wind. How many more bridges? Moraine asked sharply. 2. I think 2. Quickly then. Find it quickly. Loyal does go as quickly as he can, but he's kind of crying to himself about how people came out mad and screaming. They are much less worried about traps now. They just need to make it to the end. They didn't even bother with the last guiding, which I'm glad it wasn't super necessary. Out of the darkness the gates appeared, vine-carved and standing alone in the black like a tiny piece of wall in the night. Moraine leaned out of her saddle, reaching toward the carving, and suddenly pulled back. The Avendasora leaf is not here. The key is gone. I'm like, oh shit. What's gonna happen? How do they get out of this? How do they get out of this? Because it didn't occur to me that Moraine could use the power to make an Avendasora leaf or whatever it is that she actually does. And I admit on my first read-through I was kind of confused about what was happening as it was happening. I had the general idea, but the images in my mind weren't super clear. Loyal gives out a mournful cry, like a howl of dying. Egwene touches Rand's arm, and he tries to be brave. Moraine raises her staff, and flame lanced from the end of it. It was not pure white flame, but sickly yellow streaked through the fire and slow drifting flecks of black like soot, so that's naturally the corruption. It's weakening her flame. Thin acrid smoke from it. It's causing everyone to cough. And then we get the description. Stone melted like butter, leaf and vine withering in the flame and vanishing. The Aes Sedai moved the fire as fast as she could, but cutting an opening big enough for everyone to get through was no quick task. So I think the reason I was a bit confused here on my first read-through is that I knew what she was doing, but I didn't understand how it was getting to the end result that I knew it must get to, because I guess I just had imagined these gates as requiring the proper key. I didn't think it was something that you could, just cut open. So I guess then I was, trying to rationalize that in my mind as we get through some of the description as maybe she's trying to cut some stone to protect them from the wind, like that they could hide behind, is how I tried to rationalize it. But what happens, happens. So that was my experience on the first read-through. Rand's cloak stirred as if caught by the edge of a breeze, and his heart froze. And I had an interesting thought at that line, something to the effect of, wait, Fade's cloaks don't move. Is there a connection between the Fades and the Way? I mean, I guess it's a shock to them that there could be Trollocs and Fades in the Way, so maybe not, but would their cloaks move in the Ways? Interesting idea. Matt feels it. Moraine is half done. A thin line ran across the stone carving, and Rand thinks he can see dim light. The wind is getting closer. Rand wonders if they all push together, if they can help. Mandarb does some cool warhorse stuff with a falling stone of some kind, and the way is more or less open, with Lan and Mandarb going through the smoky shimmer of a waygate. The light that came through was mid-morning light, pale and thin, but it seemed to Rand as if the noonday summer sun blazed in his face. Rand forces Bella through first, which is great, sweet. I hope Egwene appreciates that. Moraine orders them all out first. This is the Gandalf moment. All of you out, quickly, go! As she spoke, the Aes Sedai thrust her staff out at arm's length, pointed back toward the guiding. Something leaped from the end of the staff like liquid light rendered to a syrup of fire, a blazing spear of white and red and yellow streaking into the black, exploding, coruscating like shattered diamonds. The wind shrieked in agony, it screamed in rage. And there are thousands of murmurs on the wind. Rand feels as if he can almost understand them. Rand makes it through. He turns back. I'm scanning through the prose. I'm not seeing the description of the others making it through. Mat or Perrin or Loyal. Strange. Lan is looking at the way gate as if he's about to charge back in to rescue Moraine. I wasn't worried that Moraine would die or go missing. I didn't really think at any point that anyone would die in this process. And I think I mentioned that in the last chapter or so as well. But eventually Moraine backs out into the world, out of the ways. We get the lines, as if from a great distance the wind howled at them, hidden voices filled with an unquenchable thirst for living things, filled with a hunger for pain, filled with frustration. The voices seemed to whisper in Rand's ears, right at the brink of understanding and within it. Flesh so fine to tear, to gash the skin, skin to strip, to plate, so nice to plate the strips, so nice, so red the drops that fall, and it goes on. Like that. It's visceral imagery. But the blackness lessens and fades to a murky shimmer. Everyone lets out a shuddering breath. Even Lan is relieved in the way he holds himself. And this is it. This is the line. This is the homage. Moraine says, "It could not pass." Fun. Good bit of humor. I don't think it's humorous to them. It's a relief to them, but it's meta humor. It could not pass. I thought it could not. I hoped it could not. Ah. And her staff is charred and black and corrupt. The taint corrupts everything in that place. Nynaeve demands to know what it is, and Loyal says, "Why, Machin Shin, of course, the black wind that steals souls." But Nynaeve does not find that satisfactory. She wants to know what it is. A Trolloc you can look at and touch, but that thing, and they don't really know, but Moraine says, something left from the time of madness, perhaps, or even from the War of the Shadow, the War of Power. Something hiding in the ways so long it can no longer get out. No one, not even among the Ogier, knows how far the ways run, or how deep. It could even be something of the ways themselves. As Loyal said, the ways are living things, and all living things have parasites. Perhaps even a creature of the corruption itself, something born of the decay, something that hates life and light. But Egwene cuts her off and doesn't want to hear any more. There's a lot there that I want to sit with and just think on, insofar as what it is, because I think, grasp at it from a conceptual place, but within the world, a literal, it's harder to say. But Moraine says there's worse to be faced yet, that the gate is dangerously unprotected, and the thing cannot get out, but anyone could wander in. Agelmar must send men to wall it up once we reach Faldara. Which, as I indicated earlier on in the chapter, the good have won a great victory here through gaining the knowledge that the Trollocs can use these passageways. And the chapter does end with a map. I looked at the map. I see Faldara. I see Tar Valon. And whether or not they would have wanted to use the Tar Valon gate after seeing the trap that went off there is its own issue. But maybe I'm not great with spatial distance and maps. But Tar Valon doesn't look so horribly far from Faldara. They could have gotten out there, but who knows, maybe the politics of Tar Valon would have made things more difficult once there. But was it worth the risk, Moraine, if that's the case? Hard to say. They made it there. That's what's important. And hopefully none of them are too much the worse for wear. You know, these ideas that Loyal has implanted in us of no one who ever came out was ever the same again. They all seem pretty relieved, and I don't know how permanently harmed they were by that experience. I'm not making light of the experience of that wind at all, but it doesn't necessarily seem, as far as the Emmonsfielders are concerned, any worse than what they've had to deal with elsewhere. And as Moraine says, there's going to be worse to come. Lot to think about. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.